Hi, I'm Jim, and if you've ever felt confused by someone's silence, hurt by their sudden withdrawal, or found yourself asking, what did I do wrong to make them pull away? This video is for you. Today, we're going to uncover 18 of the most profound psychological truths, not to judge others, but to truly understand their inner world, especially the mind of someone with an avoidant attachment style. The ones who rarely speak openly, rarely show vulnerability, yet reveal everything through their distance, tension, and repeated emotional patterns. Avoidants aren't cold. They're often people who learn to shut down emotionally in order to survive a world where closeness once meant pain. But that doesn't mean you have to shrink yourself or stay trapped in relationships built on distance and doubt. This video will teach you how to recognize the mask, hear what isn't being said, and see the child hiding behind the strong, self-reliant shell. Not so you can solve them like a puzzle, but so you can know when to stay with compassion and when to walk away with self-respect. This is a 3-part journey. Skip it and you'll miss the deeper layers of truth. Hit subscribe and stay until the end, because what you're about to learn won't just change how you see others, it may just set you free from half-hearted love. Avoidants don't show up with their truth. They show up with a curated version of themselves. Stable, independent. I don't need anyone. But if you're perceptive, you'll see they're not living in peace. They're operating from a defense system deeply wired into their psyche. Not because they want to deceive you, but because at some point they had to trade their emotions for survival. To them, intimacy is not a destination, it's a threat. Attachment was once followed by pain. So they learn to keep a distance, not because they don't feel, but because they were once left alone with those feelings for far too long. They learned, if I need someone, I will hurt. And so the mask forms. That mask isn't fake, it's protective. But the paradox is, the more they try to hide, the more it leaks. You'll see it in how their body stiffens when you ask, "What are you thinking?" Or how quickly they change the subject when closeness arises. You'll catch it in the averted gaze, in the quick, "I'm fine," spoken like a reflex. Every cold behavior is a silent plea. "Don't see me, I'm not ready to be seen." I tell you this not to make you pity them, but to help you recognize you're not wrong for sensing something is off. You're not too sensitive. You're picking up on what's real. And more importantly, you have the right to be with someone who's willing to take off the mask. Not all at once, but step by step, with honesty and intent. There's a thin line between compassion and self-abandonment. This video isn't here to feed the illusion that you can fix the avoidant. It's here to remind you, if you keep reaching for someone who isn't ready to reach back, you're turning away from yourself, and that is a cost you don't deserve to pay. I share this not just as someone who studies psychology, but as someone who has stood on that edge between loving someone and learning how to hold on to my own self-respect. No love is worth the price of daily silence. So if you notice the cracks in an avoidance mask, don't rush in to patch them. Pause, turn inward, ask yourself, am I silencing my own needs just to avoid being left? Because understanding someone does not mean abandoning yourself. And when you truly get that, you'll stop begging for commitment. You remember that you deserve a connection that doesn't need chasing to keep. When you begin to notice the cracks in an avoidance mask, what matters most isn't how you react, but whether you have the courage to look deeper. And what you'll see isn't malice. It's a quiet war they've been fighting inside themselves every single day, because the one they're rejecting isn't you. It's themselves. Avoidants don't express pain by breaking down. They mock, they detach, they intellectualize. But pay attention, what they criticize in others is often exactly what they were never allowed to accept in themselves. They scoff at people who are too emotional, but deep down, they are the ones who once felt too much and had no one to witness it. They reject emotions because at some point emotions became the enemy. Emotions got them hurt, judged, or left behind. And here's the painful truth. Avoidants are not just defending themselves from others, they're defending themselves from the soft, tender parts within, the parts that were dismissed, shamed, or laughed at. Every judgment they project onto others is often an internal voice they've carried since childhood. When they say things like, "Stop being so dramatic," or "You're too sensitive," or "It's not that deep," they're not belittling you. Their scars are speaking. They're repeating the words once said to them by a parent, a teacher, or a culture that taught them feelings are weakness, be strong or be unloved. So when they criticize vulnerability, they're confronting their own. The part of them that was never taught what to do with their pain. The part that had to bury it to survive. And tragically, that's also what keeps them from true intimacy, because intimacy demands what they've spent years disowning. Vulnerability. If you're on the other side of that someone who wants real connection, who's willing to be open and love without conditions, it's natural to feel hurt, confused, or even angry. That's okay. But I'm here to remind you, their judgment does not define you. It's a mirror of their own wounds, not a verdict on your worth. And in that moment, you're offered a choice. Chase them to prove you're not too much, or pause, breathe, and stand firmly in your self-respect. Not from cold detachment, but from clarity. Not by hardening yourself, but by gently telling yourself, I don't need to shrink my feelings to be loved. I only need the right person who values them. We're now entering deeper waters where criticism no longer needs to be combated but understood. Not to justify being hurt, but to understand where your boundary begins. Because only when you're rooted in your own clarity can you avoid being swept up in someone else's emotional defense. Once you begin to understand that an avoidance criticism isn't truly about you, but a mirror of what they can't face in themselves, you stop feeling the need to shapeshift just to earn closeness. And it's from that very clarity that you'll start hearing an even more subtle language, the language of silence, control, and denial. Avoidants don't often raise their voices, but within their silence is a storm. When they say, I'm fine, what they might really mean is, I don't know how to feel this without being overwhelmed. When they go quiet in the middle of an important conversation, when they look away, when they suddenly disappear, it's not because they don't care. It's because the emotions are too much and they don't know how to stay present with them. So they return to the safest ground they know, control. Control over their schedule, control over their space. Control over feelings their own, and sometimes even yours. You'll notice they avoid questions like, how do you feel? What did that bring up for you? How can I support you? Instead, they'll say, it's nothing. Let's not talk about it, or everything's under control. But you feel it. Everything is not under control, and you begin to doubt yourself. This is the trap that emotionally attuned people often fall into, trying to decode silence by softening themselves, by being gentler, more patient, more understanding. But the truth is, it's not that you lack patience, it's that they haven't yet felt safe enough to let their guard down. Control is not a sign of strength, it's a coping mechanism. Avoidants micromanage their external world because they feel powerless within. They fixate on the smallest details, schedules, routines, even the words they choose, because any disruption could trigger a wave of emotions they don't know how to contain. You'll notice it in half-finished conversations, in last-minute cancellations, in that feeling like you're walking on eggshells, constantly tiptoeing around what might be too much for them. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll see it. You're carrying the emotional load for both of you. I'm not saying this to make you feel defeated. I'm saying this to help you wake up. A healthy relationship shouldn't require you to overfunction just to keep the peace. Silence may be a language of trauma boot. It can also be a signal that someone isn't ready to share their inner world with you. Self-respect doesn't mean walking away at the first sign of difficulty. But it also doesn't mean staying in a relationship defined by distance and confusion. Self-respect is having the clarity to say, they're not wrong for needing control, but I'm not wrong for needing connection. I We're entering the deepest layer, now the space where there are no words left, only presence or absence. And in the next section, you'll begin to see more clearly why the most put-together people on the outside are often the most overwhelmed inside. Because control doesn't come from peace, it comes from a fear of losing it. And once you understand that, you stop reacting and begin responding with calm, with clarity, and without self-betrayal. Once you start hearing the language of silence, control, and denial, something becomes clear. Avoidants aren't lacking in emotion. They're lacking trust that their emotions will be accepted. And when you look beyond those defense mechanisms, you'll begin to see the deeper root where every present-day reaction is an echo of an old wound. Avoidants didn't become distant by nature. They learned it. They were once children who had to manage big emotions alone. Maybe they had emotionally unavailable parents. Maybe they grew up in environments where emotions were seen as inconvenient, weak, or even shameful. So that child in chronic emotional lonely learn how to self-regulate, learn how to not need anyone, no dependence, no expression, no asking for anything. But the price of early independence is this: they grew up never learning how to trust connection. They stopped needing others not because they were strong, but because once they did need and they were abandoned. That wound was never spoken, never soothingly buried, and it continues to operate in the background, replaying like an old script. This is why in a relationship today, an avoidant may suddenly shut down in moments of intimacy, not because they dislike you, but because their nervous system has been wired to warn closeness is danger. When you hold them too long, ask too deeply, or love too sincerely, they don't feel safe. They feel triggered. They're not reacting to you. They're reacting to a past that still lives inside them. A soft look from you might remind them of being smothered. A tender word might poke at an old betrayal. You're not just talking to the adult in front of you, you're interacting with parts of them they haven't even met yet. And here's the heartbreaking part. Avoidants often don't know this. They believe they're acting logically, reasonably. It's not that serious. But as Nietzsche said, people don't act from logic, they act from pain. Logic is just the mask built to protect the wound that's never been healed. So when the avoidant seems detached or overly rational in emotional moments, don't be fooled. They're not indifferent, they're overwhelmed. And their rationality is just a coping tool to keep everything from spiraling out of control. I share this, not so you'll try to heal them, but so you can heal yourself from internalizing their avoidance. Their detachment is not a rejection of your worth. It's a confession that they aren't yet ready to enter a space where emotion is welcome, where it's safe. You cannot love someone hard enough to make them outgrow their trauma, but you can love yourself deeply enough not to get pulled into that trauma as if it's yours to solve. And if you're in a relationship with an avoidant, ask yourself, am I here because of love or because I secretly hope my presence might heal them? A relationship is where both people learn to move closer. It's not a place where one person is constantly chipping away at the walls of another while slowly draining themselves dry. When you begin to see that the avoidant isn't truly reacting to you but is reliving an emotional script from childhood, something softens in you. You stop taking it personally. You stop trying to fix yourself. What replaces it is a quieter understanding, but moving from understanding them to protecting yourself in that dynamic. That's another journey altogether. Because after the silence, control, and withdrawal, what you'll face next is cold, calculated logic. Avoidants are often brilliant at explaining things away. They'll give you a neat, rational breakdown of why emotions are too much, why distance is healthy, and why this isn't a big deal. But if you really listen not just to their words, but to the gaps between their words, you'll begin to hear the truth. They once believed, once felt, once loved, and once got hurt. Logic, in this case, isn't a tool for clarity. It's armor. They use intellect to shield themselves from the pain they haven't learned to sit with, pain they never had the safety or tools to process, pain from being dismissed, abandoned, or made to feel like their feelings were too much. So when real emotion starts to rise, their nervous system reaches for safety in the form of detachment, rationalization, and distance. They might say things like, "I don't believe in love," or "You're overreacting," or "Feelings are just chemicals." But behind every statement like that is a wound that never got to heal, a love that was betrayed, a vulnerability that was punished, a promise that was broken. Defensiveness isn't weakness, it's learned survival. Avoidance, we're often taught, feelings make you weak, weakness gets you hurt, so don't feel. And they believe that message so deeply they built an identity around it. But here's the tragedy. In refusing to feel, they also reject the opportunity to truly heal. Because no amount of logic can replace the power of simply allowing oneself to grieve, to need, to carand, still know they're not shameful for it. If you're the one standing beside them, loving them with sincerity, listening without judgment, you've likely found yourself left cold in conversations where your heart spoke and they replied with intellect. In those moments, remember this, their logic isn't truth, it's a barrier. And you are not meant to climb it, break it, or prove your worth through it. You are meant to hold your truth too. You can step back without resentment. You can love without performing. And most of all, you can keep your dignity even in the face of rational rejection. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't understanding another layer of their pain, but understanding yourself deeply enough not to stay where you constantly have to prove that your emotions are valid. After all the cold logic and seemingly indifferent behavior, you begin to see clearly. The issue isn't that the avoidant lacks emotion, it's that they don't believe emotion, theirs or yours, is truly safe in a relationship. And in that moment, you stand at a crossroads. You can either react from fear or respond with clarity. Understanding the avoidant is not about fixing them. It's not an invitation to change them, to break through their walls, or to wait patiently until they suddenly soften and open up. Understanding is what allows you to stop reacting from your own fear. Because what hurts you most isn't just their behavior, it's the story you tell yourself about it. They're distant because I'm not enough. They're silent because I messed up. They won't open up because I'm not worth being close to. But when you begin to see the fear behind their avoidance, you stop personalizing it. You no longer feel the need to chase, explain, or shrink yourself to fit. Instead, you respond with steadiness. Not the fake toughness of "I don't need anyone," but the grounded truth of "I deserve a relationship where emotions are heard. I can love someone without hurting myself to keep them." Their silence no longer robs you of sleep. Their distance no longer sends you into panic, because now you know. If someone is truly able to come close, they will do so willingly. And if avoidance is how they survive, then connection must start with them, not with your over-efforting. Self-respect isn't pride. It's being open, just not so open that you lose yourself. You stop walking on eggshells. You stop reading into every furrowed brow. You stop exhausting yourself trying to be chosen. You realize real love isn't about pursuit, it's about presence. And if you've always been the one keeping the relationship alive, the one who understands more, gives more, stays softer longer, maybe now is the moment to ask, am I giving from wholeness or from a fear of being left? When you begin to see the avoidant not as someone cruel, but as someone who never learned how to stay with emotion, you also stop fighting. Not because you're giving up, but because you know. A connection built on one person's effort isn't a relationship, it's a burden. And love isn't a battle to win, it's a space both people create together. From that space, you no longer react from pain, you respond from principle. You might say, "You need space, I understand, but I need presence too. And if you can't give that right now, I will give that presence to myself." That's not withdrawal, it's self-honoring. And from there, something powerful shifts. When you stop reacting from the fear of losing someone, you begin living more truthfully with yourself. And the person worthy of that truth, they won't need to be convinced to stay. You've reached the end of this journey, not a journey of decoding others, but a journey of understanding yourself in a world full of masks. And maybe what you realize now isn't just the truth about avoidant people, but the truth about your own longing to be seen, heard, and connected. A longing you've quietly carried for far too long. Because the deepest wound doesn't come from someone's silence, it comes from the moment you began to question your worth because they couldn't love you the way you needed. So let me leave you with this, not just a closing, but a new beginning. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are not wrong for wanting to be chosen, heard, and seen fully. Ada. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit into someone's emotionally shut down world. And you do not need to wait for someone to remove their mask to know that you are worthy of love, because the life you're living in, your truth, is already proof of your value. Reading people is not about control, it's about breaking the cycle of reactive fear. And when you learn how to step back with compassion without stepping away from yourself, you become unshakable. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If what you've heard today helped you feel clearer, lighter, and stronger, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video so we no longer have to heal in silence. And if you want to go even deeper into the roots of attachment, old wounds, and the path to real healing, subscribe. There's so much more to uncover. But what matters most has already begun. You're coming home to yourself.